Welcome to episode number 8 of Awaken the Feminine Within. It is a wild ride. I can't believe that we're here at episode 8 already. I had it on my heart today to talk about anxiety because I feel like every single woman that I know deals and struggles with anxiety. And as I've leaned more into feminine energy and become a feminine energy coach, I run my business intuitively. And when I speak with women, or even when I have, women who come into my studio, I'm not trying, especially for my clients who are maybe listening to this podcast episode, I'm never, tapping into how you feel intrusively. It's always just, I get a vibe, as most often women do when they have their intuition. And there's a lot of women, women I just meet and interact with and have coffee with and, et cetera, who, I always feel the anxiety. And I always just wonder, it's hard. It's hard to deal with. It's hard to live with. And so I want to talk to you about it today because, and my husband can attest to this, people who have known me, I had really, really bad anxiety. And oftentimes it came along with depression. And I wanted to title this specifically about anxiety because not everyone who struggles with anxiety has the depression side of it. But for me, the depression has been a massive, massive burden along with the anxiety. And they were always linked together. It was always together in my experience. So first off, let's back up for a minute and give you, a background rundown as to what my history is like. So I grew up with a mother who she still does have anxiety, but she had really, 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 really bad anxiety. And it was always worry about this, worry about that, worry about this, worry about that. And I always just remember thinking like, Mom, like, why do you have to be like, I was always confused as to why she was always so pent up about things, certain things. Now, as a child, our perspective is we don't have the same burdens that our parents do, right? So when we just don't understand. We don't understand the struggles that they're going with. And so I took on that nature. I just, without even realizing it, when I went to college, I had such anxiety about buying groceries because I was worried about finances. And it just felt like such a burden because I always had a mom who, always bought the groceries for me. And then it got really bad once I had children. And I think, any moms who are listening to this or might be nodding their heads and being like, yeah, I also experienced that, like pregnancy does something to the body, and let alone, let's not even talk about, postpartum depression and all that good stuff. But a lot of moms find that they don't recover from that postpartum stress, postpartum, depression kind of things. And it morphs into this, whether it's anxiety and depression or anxiety or depression as well. And then now you have this little human that you have to worry about. And your duties and who's relying on you expands, right? So there's a lot of weight there. So for me, I always have postpartum depression with every single child. I've always had it. And it really just became my overall perspective in life from the time that I was preteen, teenager. I was always under the impression, especially when I left home, that I had to control as much as I possibly could. And I don't know where I gathered that from. I think it was a society thing. I think I, definitely inherited some from my mom. I could definitely see how she was, that worry always felt like it was a sense of control that she could control. So therefore it was like, oh, well, this is just what I'm supposed to do, right? And then after children, it seemed to get amplified where there was more to worry about, more to be frustrated about, more to be concerned about, more to control. It was just more, and not in a positive way. And finances plays a huge role in this. I can't tell you, I think from the time that I've had to worry about finances, it's always up until a couple years ago. It has always been worry, think myself to death, complain to death, literally try and dump as many of my frustrations as I possibly humanly can on anyone and everyone where it's appropriate, and maybe even sometimes where it's not appropriate. And so, it's always felt suffocating. This anxiety, this pent up, like I struggled going to networking events, which I had to do in order to build my business. I struggled speaking to other people. I struggled, in every aspect of my business, even meeting other moms, even when my kids were little, like there was just always anxiety about how my business is doing, anxiety about my marriage, anxiety about my children, anxiety about, their relationships with their friends. Like there was just, you name it, every single avenue of life where there could be anxiety. I was an anxious, hot mess. I remember I did an antidepressant years ago, and I just remember feeling like it was too much. I was like, no, I'm that's not for me. And so I chose a holistic route. And there were times, my brother's actually a naturopath, and there were a couple times where I sent him a message and I said, this is getting a little bit beyond control. I don't want to get on medication, but I'm going to need something else because I could see the depressive state where I was starting to lose a little bit of control. And I don't want to mention the S word, but felt like it was going to go down that path. And so I was very fortunate to have him help me out in that sense. And he gave me some recommendations, but I just felt obligated. Subconsciously, I felt obligated to almost, it was like anxiety was my way of victimizing myself, for one. And for two, it felt good. That is going to sound absolutely the most confusing thing you've probably heard, because to be anxious leaves you feeling very, 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 very uncomfortable. Nobody, if you ask someone if they would choose to be anxious, they'd be like, absolutely not. You know what I mean? Never in my conscious state would I ever have chosen to be anxious. But I grew up watching an anxious mother, worry and dump. She unfortunately she didn't realize what she was doing, but she was dumping her anxiety and her worries on her family. And listen, guys, I love my mother to death, literally. And, seeing these things now from the experiences that I've had, I have nothing but empathy for her and love for her. But, she didn't know any better. It is what it is. And I'm sure we have a lot of moms who have a very similar experience to this. And so I, thinking back on my anxious phase of my life, and I'm very glad to call it a phase, I didn't know how else to be. In my mind, looking back, I'm like, what was I afraid of? I was afraid of not having control. Ultimately, and you're probably seeing a theme even in this, 8 episodes that we're getting to here now. It's like, there is a theme of, okay, why do I want to have so much control, right? What do I want to have so much control? And I say this because I was speaking with a woman like a month or so ago, and we were talking about, she was like, oh, it's tough, like waking up in the morning and having a little bit of that anxiety about like, oh, the work that I have to do today, or just, she's like, I don't even know like where it comes from, or I don't even know what I'm anxious about. It's just this like feeling that I have. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's a sign that you're not tapped into your soul essence and that you are trying to control. You're trying to control something, and also mixed with fear, but the fear usually comes from, oh, I'm afraid of what can happen. And that stems from you wanting to have control, right? So I remember specifically saying like, oh, well, that's a sign actually that there's more deep work that has to be done internally. But I'm like, it doesn't have to be like that. I'm like, you don't have to wake up like with anxiety and not know like what it's about. You don't have to have that experience. Like you can wake up and feel like you're not holding the weight on your shoulders, right? And I've been there. I remember a couple years ago, waking up with that anxiety felt like I literally woke up with a ball and chain around my ankle. And I was like a little worried about that feeling because I'm like, I really hope this is not going to be a thing. Like, I hope this is not just what my life is going to look like for the next however long I have my business or, whatever. And I'm going to get to that here in a minute. But what I wanted to say is getting back to what I was talking about before, your anxiety, if you think about it in the context of like, okay, first off, let's, if you're listening here, list and try to list your anxiety, things that you're anxious about. Okay, so I'm going to back up and kind of go back to things that I was anxious about. Let's talk about when I started my business. I was anxious about money. Primarily, number one, it was money. Number two, it was just like subconscious things that I wasn't even aware of, but I'm aware of them now. So I'm going to list them anyways, because maybe it'll, jog your conscious, subconscious, and you might be like, oh, I wasn't aware I was anxious of that. I was worried about just our kids in general and like how I was going to provide for them. Kind of ties in, of course, to money. I was worried about relationship. I was worried about my health. I was worried about just like what I was supposed to do in life. Like, what am I here for? What is my purpose? And those were the biggest things on my mind. I was like, that is what I felt like were the things that I was most anxious about. Now, of course, there were short-term, scenarios where, say, a bill was due, or, there's a birthday party to plan, or I had, an event coming up, or a big networking event, or I was hosting something at my studio. I would be really nervous about that stuff. Constantly, anxious to the point where it felt, I would shake, and it would be, it's not something that's considered, sustainable. And I think we as women, we take on and we take on and we take on and we take on, and then we don't realize until someone jolts us and is like, someone or something, or say even this podcast, or, something in your realm pulls us out of the norm. And then you have to look at it and go, wait a minute. What is really going on here, and how much am I really holding on to? Because as women and moms in today's society, it's almost like the world, the society expects that of us. It's like, I'm going to give you more and more and more, and you're supposed to carry it all. And heaven forbid you drop something, right? Except we as women are dying to offload. We are literally like killing ourselves in order to prevent offloading, but that's really what we want. We want to take off the load that we don't need to carry all this weight anymore. Ultimately, that's really what it comes down to. And then you might be thinking, I have childcare that I have issues with, or maybe, it's really expensive, and you're like, who the heck is going to watch the kids? Maybe there's something at work going on and it's just not an ideal situation, and there's bills that have to pay, or maybe you want to go on a trip and you feel like, oh my gosh, I need this job in order to maintain this lifestyle, because that's really important to you, or maybe, you're waiting for a job promotion, or whatever it might be. I want you to sit down and just try to step away from your life and look at it from a third party perspective. Say, you're just looking at yourself. You're sitting here, and then the other version of you, whoever, third party, is just looking at you from the outside. And what really is weighing you down? What do you think is really just feels like such a burden right now that you're like, I want to cut this ball and chain off, and I want to, how would I feel if I didn't have these things to worry about? And I mean on a soul level, we're going deeper here than, of course, write out the superficial ones, the more conscious ones, but then really try to tap in and be like, am I just frustrated about my state of life? Am I frustrated about where I am in life? Am I frustrated with my business? Am I frustrated with my job? Ask yourself these questions and really dig deep, dig. Is it just a lack of direction? Is it there's so many ways. Is it the children? Is it your marriage? Is it your relationship? Is it single life? What is it? Ask and dig deep. And this is not something, you might not come up with all the answers right away, but you seeking to understand what's weighing you down is going to be huge in being able to unlock where the anxiety is ultimately coming from. So from there, then you start thinking about why. Why do these feel like burdens to me, right? So taking my examples, if I go back to, the start of my business, I was like, well, I felt like I needed to make a certain amount of money. That's why it was a burden. I was like, well, I'm not doing it. I mean, I am doing this business because I thoroughly enjoy it, but also money, right? We need money. And then, bills, dues, health stuff, I felt like I had no control. That also required money because I was seeing holistic providers. And I'm like, okay, well, how am I going to pay for this, right? That's another frustration because I'm like, I can't, get my health stuff, taken care of because I have to go pay for it. And we didn't have, coverage for holistic providers at the time. And it was just like, I just feel that I can't do anything without that money side of things. And also, when I go to networking events, I'm not booking clients. And so now I just have to put myself into more uncomfortable situations because I have to do more networking events in order to get more clients. And it just feels like it's going to be so much work in order to get a singular outcome, whether that's booked clients or, just money. And then I don't know, how long it's going to take for that client to book. Am I going to have to set up another meeting? There was just so much weight and so much pressure of okay, well, I'm seeking the solution, but it feels like it's going to take me so much work and so much effort to get there, right? And even with the health, it was like, okay, well, I need money, but then how long is it going to take, right? Am I even going to get the answers that I need? There's just so many questions about, okay, I'm seeking this. Again, notice a trend here. There's control. I'm trying to find an answer. I'm getting frustrated because it feels like it's taking too long. It feels like, why can't I just have help in these areas? Why can't referrals start happening faster? Why can't the money part start coming in faster? Why can't my health stuff get figured out sooner, right? And in all the instances, really what it comes down to is, why do we need to control? That's, something you're going to want to journal on. Why do I feel that I have to know every step of the way and every single outcome? And also, do I need these to be burdens? Can I let go of them? Like, when you can start questioning how your world can change, and this, guys, is the road to getting rid of your anxiety, because now usually if I get anxious about something, because I have a weird reaction where I have like some allergy problems, not like hives allergies, but I do react to certain food, and ironically, guys, my reaction is anxiety. And I know it's like a physical thing, it's not like, emotional anxiety. And I'm not knocking like drugs. Like, if you find you're doing all this work and your anxiety is still not dissipating, of course, I'm not a doctor. You go see and take medication for your anxiety. But these are things that you can do if you're finding you're not quite fully there yet, and they may have a significant impact. So going back to, okay, do I need to be attached to my burdens? Do I want to be attached to my burdens? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I felt, going back to the whole, like, I was victimizing myself, and these burdens were almost like my shields. Because I'm like, of course, everyone has burdens. It's like the societally, stereotypically acceptable thing to have, is to have your baggage. I mean, like, everyone has baggage. Of course, everyone has baggage. I mean, sure, but I don't want to live my life flaunting my baggage and having my baggage determine what I'm capable of, and to feel like it's constantly like just weighing me down. Like, I don't want to be weighed down, but I didn't realize that I had the choice to not be weighed down. And that sounds absolutely so simple and kind of wild, because it's like, oh, of course, consciously, we would never choose to be weighed down, right? Like, no one, I think, ever consciously is like, yeah, I want to be burdened by anxiety and I want to be burdened by like by frustration in life. But these are genuine things that every single person struggles with. And as a woman, we can start challenging this. We can start stepping away from and I don't mean like physically, but, emotionally, stepping away from the problems and being like, whole intervention time, right? Like, where am I at with this? Do I want this to be like this? Because ultimately, you can choose to let go. And I'm not saying it's like, an overnight fix where you let go and are like, I'm done with this. And then, no, you have to dig in, you have to do the work. Because for me, being worried about and anxious about bills to the point where I would literally hyperventilate if, like, the money wasn't there for, whatever, say a certain date, and I had tried all my hardest and still worked clients and like whatever, it would produce a physical effect. And I was like, like walking around my house a hot, nervous mess, because I'm like, how's this, again, that questioning, that control, like, what am I going to do? Except feminine energy is about letting go and letting God's, the universe take control. And of course, there's still going to be things that we have to do. We're still called to do and to act in alignment. But outside of that, there is no need to have control. And this ties into another episode I'm going to be doing here in the future about how I make my money with feminine energy, because I touched on it very briefly in episode number 5 about why your business might not be growing, because like, it is actually really, really fascinating where the money comes from and how the clients show up. And I freaking love it, because when you are in feminine energy and you're truly trusting for the universe to provide for you, like, the clients that come to you are better. How the money comes to you is better. Like, everything is so timely and so incredible and so amazing. I'm like, dude, I couldn't have even planned this better if it had been me. Like, literally, there's no way I could plan this way and have it be so amazing this way, because I'm human and I have a small brain and, only finite ways of doing things. So why do you need to be in control? Do you want to let go? Because that's where the freedom is, and that's where the anxiety disappears. Because the things, these soul weight subconscious burdens, this ball and chain around your ankle, they start slipping away. And all of a sudden, here I am like a year later, and I'm like, oh, had I known that this was even possible, I would have been like, how much internal work do we need to get there? Because I will absolutely do that in order to live a life where I'm not waking up feeling like oh my gosh, I'm so anxious about what I have to do today. You know, like removing the control. I don't have to be in control anymore, right? Like I'm just going to do what's aligned to me, and then I'm going to let, God and the universe take care of the rest. And knowing that I can just enjoy, like I posted on my stories the other day about, like I was sitting outside, I was reading on my Kindle, and I was eating a chicken salad. And I just remember I took a picture of it and words didn't feel like enough. I was so grateful. Like I literally I'm breathless because I'm like, it takes my breath away. The fact that I get to experience a sunny day, reading my Kindle, eating amazing food. And I'm just like, holy crap. Like my life is literally beyond amazing, because like that is what I live for. Now I live like having that joy and being able to see those moments in my life, because I'm going to tell you right now, when I had my anxiety and when I was living my life according to the burdens and letting them guide me, I couldn't see that. I literally could not see it. Even if someone had placed it right smack in front of me, I would have been like, why would I focus on that? Like, hello, all my burdens are over here dictating my life. I don't have time, room, or space to, just be frilly willy-nilly and go over here and like skippity hop and live in rainbows. Like that felt like that's something only a child would do, but we get to experience that as adults. I'm telling you right now. And we as women deserve this. We deserve to have nothing but just positive things to look forward to and have nothing but positive experience in and out every single day, and to wake up and be like, oh my gosh, I don't have that weight anymore, and to celebrate that. But it does mean that we have to do that internal work to choose. And I'm going to tell you right now, like it didn't all happen overnight. Like I actively had to work through letting go of that control. And it was really, really, really hard to be like, I don't need to think about that right now. I am going to let go, relinquish control. I don't need to know how, because there were some months, and at some point I'll talk about it. But there were some months where I was like, I don't know how that's going to get paid. I really don't. And I had to be like, okay, great. Well, I'm going to just let go of that because I've done what I can do to rectify that situation. And I can tell I'm being asked to trust. I can tell I'm being asked to trust. And so building that trust and building the muscle of letting go and relinquishing control, it did take a little bit. But there was no other way I was going to choose otherwise. Letting go was the only answer. And the anxiety going away was a super added bonus of that. Like, I just realized that I couldn't control my life. I couldn't control the outcome. I just knew. I was like, I know I'm going to get what I want. That's a fact, because what I desire is mine. Like if that's something that you're working on, just know that you absolutely do deserve, and you will 100% get what you believe that you deserve, but you do have to believe it. Otherwise, stop. If you don't believe it, then it's going to feel like it's never going to come. So for me, working on that belief took me a while. And I mean, that was a whole year process, was like, oh, I can have what I want. And I don't mean yeah, it could be simple as like getting a Louis Vuitton bag. But for me, it was like, oh, I can have what I want, which is like, $1 million in passive income, and the house that I want, and the car that I want, and all that stuff. And most importantly, like money for vacations and things like that. Oh, I can have that. And to be able to sit with that desire and not feel guilt, shame, frustration, oh, it's never going to happen, any of those things, it was a lot of work, but it was game changing for me. So the reason why I'm talking about all this is because you can desire to not have anxiety. You can desire to not have depression, but that desire comes from your willingness to be able to let go. Your willingness to dig into the burdens that are anchoring you down right now, to ask yourself why, to do this internal work, to clear yourself and to open up the doors of what it's like to just not feel burdened on a soul level. And to not be, and to open yourself up to the idea of just living joyfully and having, that, whether it's that lunchtime experience or, even for me, like this morning, by accident, my husband and I had a date morning breakfast, and it totally wasn't planned. We were going to buy something off of Facebook Marketplace, and I was literally dying of starvation. And because we ran out the door because we were taking the kids to school, we ended up at a breakfast place that we've only ever gone to on Sunday brunches. And I was like, why don't we just stop there on the way home? And he was like, oh, that's a great idea. And we just kind of sat there and looked at each other and held hands. And we were like, this is so nice. Holy crap. And did we need this? Because he's been out of town working half the week. I've been really busy, and we've been going for the last 6 weeks, really, really busy schedules. And I just sat there and I was like, this is literally so amazing. Like if I could, like, it's like my brain is video recording these moments and like, but like 10x throughout the day. And I'm like, oh, I love this moment so much. Like I'm so grateful that I get to live this. I like pinch myself like all the time throughout the day because I'm just like, oh, I get to sit here and read a book. I get to have a favorite food, or I get to have this time and this moment with my husband. Like I'm so beyond grateful. And that gratitude, I created room for it, because before I didn't have room. I didn't have space. It was just like my whole entire reality was overwhelmed by the burdens that I was having. And it was like, that was all I was willing to see, until I intentionally chose minute after minute over time that I wanted to see something else. And I wanted to let go of those burdens. And I wanted to heal that part of myself so that I could live this joyful life where I get to experience contentment, pleasure, desire, joy, like silly joy, and just be a kid. Like I used to, this is going to sound really funny, but we get annoyed by happy people when I was younger because I was a pessimist is what I would call it. And I was like, you know what, that's really annoying, like being around happy people. But I was actually just jealous of the fact that they didn't have the worries burdening them down like I was. And I'm like, what right do they have? You know, like that's just so irritating. Like it grates on your nerves. And, you know, if anyone's had that experience, they'll be like, yep, I know exactly what that feels like. And now I've turned into one of those people, because I'm like, nothing is going to stop me from enjoying to live this life. Like I have one, and I am I want to teach my children, most especially, that they can live it like that too. And that is going to be one of the best things that I feel like I could do as a mother, is to give my kids the tools to not have the burdens of anxiety and depression. I mean, depression can be, you know, that's a whole other can of worms. And, you know, it can be genetic. And I am proud to say that I don't struggle with the depression, even remotely, probably even 70% of what I used to. And I mean, it is genetic. Like my dad had depression. And so I'm very pleased to report that. I will say that this healing work did more help than any kind of supplement or medication that I personally took. I still on occasion will take supplements, you know, say for example, it's like that time of the month and there's hormones in play and things like that. I will take supplements to help with some of that, the moodiness. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, you know, premenstrual anxiety. I'm talking about like that core, like you just feel like you can't escape it. It's closing in on you. It feels like the world is just getting smaller and you're losing, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel. So I hope that this was, number one, really eye-opening, and number two, that you'll sit down and journal and really start asking yourself, like, what would it feel like to let go of these burdens? What would it feel like to start opening myself up to the healing process, to, you know, joy in my life? Like, what would it feel like to let go? You know, and to start contemplating that and moving in that direction and choosing it every single day. You wake up and just choosing and be like, oh, well, I could just, you know, what's bothering me today? Like, can I let go of this? Is that something I want to do? Am I willing to see what it feels like to let it go? And to question it, to just start carving out a life with no anxiety, because it absolutely 1,000,000% can be done. And it's just a matter of like, okay, it's scary. It's going to feel absolutely terrifying. You don't know what you don't know. And that's okay. It's perfectly normal to be scared, but it's better to do it scared than to not do it at all and to feel like you're succumbed to something, right? You're not succumbed to anything. You are 100% in control. You can be in control. Your inner self is like waiting to be seen and heard and to live vibrantly. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's about helping women to tap in to that side of things. So if you found this super helpful, please, please, please share this with a friend. It means the world to me to have women who resonate with this and know that it might help someone else in their life. If you can, please also subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That would mean the world. If you're not a listener on Apple Podcasts, that's totally fine. And if you haven't already, this is like, I'm recording this right now. I'm looking into a camera. And so if you want to watch it on YouTube, I would totally be tickled if you could come and subscribe and maybe even just, you know, drop a comment or something on YouTube, because yeah, I have a connection. I love to watch podcasts on YouTube. That's actually, if there is a podcast on YouTube, I will watch it there first over listening. And that's just my personal preference. But if you have a takeaway, I want to hear from you. I want you to come and post in our Facebook group, which is called The Intuitive Woman. It's the link to it is actually in the footer of this podcast episode. So all you have to do is just go in there and click it. And I want you to share with me what your takeaway was from this episode. So if you have anxiety, I want to know, tell us about it. Share with the women in that group, because I set up that group for women to have a connection with other women who are trying to make active, positive change in their life. So if you can do that, be vulnerable. I would love to hear from you. Tag me. It would mean the world to me to see you in there and to engage with you. I love nothing more than to build a vulnerable, safe place with women who are looking out for nothing but other women and are longing for that sisterhood and that family. So come and do that. I cannot wait to see you there, and I will see you in the next episode.